Well, this is the first episode of a new podcast. This is Melwood because what Liverpool Football Club and fans need right now is another podcast on Liverpool. I am joined by Don King from the Daily Mail. I am joined by God, aka Robbie Fowler.
Hey.
And James Pearce from the Athletic, and it's me, Jamie Carragher. And we are sat in Jurgen Klopp's old office. Not just Jurgen Klopp's, Gerard Houllier, Brendan Rodgers, Rafa Benitez, all those managers in that time. So to kick off the first one, I'll start with you, Dom. What is your first memory of Melwood?
Where I'm sat now, I'm looking over at my old school, standing on the fences, looking when the team bus used to park right over that back wall. And we used to get autographs from the team from the 80s, and my mum and dad's house is just over the road, so I was basically down there. It's a great big part of my life. I used to look through the slats in the walls over there, seeing all the teams training, so yeah, it's like...
Did you rob any balls when you went over?
Plenty of them. I remember getting one of those old tangos. Somebody had kicked it over into the school.
It's probably Nicky Tanner.
Might be one of yours, that
yeah, it might be mine.
I remember sitting in for footy the following day in school. It was the most popular I'd ever been in my life.
Robbie?
I think my earliest memory is just getting off the bus. I think we've spoke a few times about when we were kids. You get off, you get obviously invited up here for trials and then see what happens. But I remember getting two buses from school, the 27 and then the 12, and getting off at Melwood Drive. But you remember when you were a kid and you used to go to the match and you could see the floodlights from a distance, and you're obviously this urban jungle, and then all of a sudden you walk up the steps and you see the green of the floodlights, obviously on the grass. That's my memory of this as well. So you get off the bus, but you can see the floodlights from a distance, and then obviously what are they, 8 foot walls? Are they 8 foot concrete walls? Getting off the bus and then just
far away
and then just getting off the bus, and then just obviously where Dom's just described it, and is getting through these big mega red gates years ago, which were open all the time back then, and coming in and just trading in the little building over there. This was obviously before this office was built, but I mean they've great memories, and I always remember the pitches being, regardless of what the staff were saying, it was like a Wembley, there was a pigsty, and because obviously various elements of the way the ground was, but all the grounds were brilliant and far better than what we were ever used to.
James?
Yeah, it would have been probably 96 when I first moved to Liverpool as a student. Me and my mate Pete used to always come down here a couple of times a week, hang around outside the old gate on the far side, waiting for get autographs and a few pictures and all the rest of it. And
he must have followed you off a few times.
many times, yeah. And then, I guess, and then the other, I think probably the other buzz would have been starting at the Echo and actually getting the chance to actually walk through the gates properly. Would have been when Rafa was in charge, started to do press conferences then, and then when Brendan took over, actually being in this room once a week, having like a weekly slot with him.
Probably the fact that we're in this room. I mean, did you have any sort of experience of being here and almost getting a dressing down from a manager from something that you drove?
Yeah, there was once with Brendan when we had there was an issue with Brendan once. One of the best memories actually I've had in here was with Roy. I only came up here once with Roy Hodgson.
Not surprised he was only 6.
But no, we had an afternoon, and he was absolutely brilliant. Just like a real nice gentleman talking stories. I remember never got up here with Brendan. Met Rafa for the first time in here, but it's how many times did you get brought up here for the week told off? This is the headmaster's office, wasn't it?
Probably. I was knocking on these doors all the time under Rafa. I came when I signed back to Liverpool. I knew I wasn't going to play much, but one of them, just when you're here, just that professionalism kicks in, don't you? So you're knocking on the door every time. Well, why aren't you playing? And I knew why I wasn't playing, because it just wasn't very good at the time. But I was all the time, and he used to sit you down, Rafa, and he was so blunt, and he'd tell you the reason. Well, these are ahead of you because basically they're better than you. It's hard to take as a player, it really is.
My memory is that piece of grass there, basically, that used to be in between the shooting boards, and I must have been up 9 and 10, and it was like a pre-season, and it wasn't a trial as such, but it was almost like you knew the group was almost too big and some of the lads were going to be let go, and it was over like a month period in the pre-season. The weather was nice and it was just playing sort of five-a-side in between the boards there. The boards have obviously gone, so that was my first recollection of basically trying to get a contract from the age of 9 or 10. But that takes me to where I want to go with saying with this first podcast is basically contracts. It feels like contracts are the big talking point of Liverpool this summer, and it won't change, whether that's players not getting contracts, players leaving because of a contract issue, or the majority of the squad now getting new contracts, and that's the real business that Liverpool will do this summer. I mean, James, for Liverpool supporters out there who are after a new midfield player, they're after a new attacking player, have they almost got to get the head round that Liverpool's money this season is going to be spent on new contracts for the current squad?
Yeah. That is certainly a massive part of Michael Edwards and Mike Gordon's work this summer is retention, and of course, I think it's probably a massive cost that a lot of fans almost don't maybe fully appreciate just what it takes to tie down these elite players for the long term. And there's a lot of big decisions and tough negotiations that are ongoing at the moment. We've seen, I don't think it's any great surprise that Trent Alexander-Arnold and Fabinho have got over the line first, because I think.
James, can I just stop you there just before you carry on? So you're not talking about obviously the way going forward, certainly this year for Liverpool is about retention. Why wasn't Wijnaldum captain?
Well, because of his age and because of what he was demanding. So I mean, and that kind of, this feeds into the issue that they're wrestling with at the moment is they can't allow too many of this team to grow old together. And obviously, Wijnaldum pushing 31, and obviously he wanted 3 or 4 years on massive money, and Liverpool just weren't prepared to offer him that. And
is that something that I think supporters have almost got to get their heads around? And this is something I've spoke to friends outside, and we talk about Wijnaldum going on a free contract, and you say, how can you let a player go for free? But a 4-year deal now on the wages players are in, and this is not being a bitter expert, good luck to them. You're in, what they deserve and what the market value is. But it is almost like a transfer fee now, isn't it? Someone's wages over a 4-year period could be £40 million, and it is big money. So when people criticise the owners at times for not bringing players in, is that something as a fan base that we've almost got to get our head around, that a contract is massive money now for the club?
And I think it is definitely something that maybe isn't widely appreciated, because just look at the wage bill, in which people point at the net spend, don't they, for the last few years, and say the number of people on social media that say to me, hang on mate, we won the Champions League, we won the Premier League, where's all the money gone? As if there's like a big pot of cash just sitting in the corner in Kirby. And the reality is the wage bill's now 325 million a year, second only to City, and that is a massive part of the revenues, and especially then on the back of the pandemic, that makes those tough decisions over who do you really throw money at, who do you really prioritise, and who you don't. It makes those decisions, I think, even more difficult.
John, or go to Robbie actually on that. Have you got any recollection yourself of contract talks that you went through that maybe were prolonged, or were yours done quite quickly?
Yeah, I think they always was, because I always wanted to stay, and it was never. I mean, it's not true, because obviously football now is obviously totally different to what it was years ago. We were basically offered something. You go back maybe a few times, and then you were happy to sign it. For me, there was. I mean, I come out and said it not long ago. Actually, Harry Kane's probably the perfect example now, where there's like a gentleman's agreement, or if you get X amount of money or clause in your contracts, you can go. I was never interested in putting clause in my contract, because if I'm happy to sign a contract, I'm happy to sign a contract. So I'm happy to stay at the club. So as soon as I not got what I wanted, or you sort of get in that periphery of where you think you should be, then I was more than happy to sign. I mean, I don't remember signing that many contracts, in all fairness, because obviously I'd signed a 5-year contract. And fair play to the club. I remember doing my knee, actually. I was talking to the club about a long-term contract then. I remember doing my knee, having the operation, being in the hospital bed, looking at my leg, and seeing the wound was open, because obviously it hadn't been stitched. And the first thought that came into my head was, my career is finished. You know, I'm done, because, you know, I didn't know what was happening with the contract situation. And the club, were, to be fair, were very good, and they just turned around and said, well, look, get yourself right, and then obviously we'll keep these negotiations going. Got myself fit then, probably not the same player in all fairness, but, you know, the club were good in terms of keeping the, you know, keeping the contract open and keeping the discussions going.
I obviously only played at Liverpool, and my recollection of the club is that they were the best at contracts in terms of, I'm not talking about financially, always one of the best payers, we were always one of the biggest clubs, but how they treated players, it was, even if you signed a contract and after 12 months you'd moved up a couple of levels or you were a regular in the first, they would rip that contract up even if you had 3 years to go, 4 years to go, and give you the new one, because they'd say, no, you deserve to be on that now. And what you just said about being injured, when I broke my leg at Blackburn, I actually signed a contract when I was out with a broken leg. Right. You know, Rick Parry, you know, we were talking beforehand, getting a contract sorted, and I actually signed when my leg was in a cast. So that just shows how the club always treated. I always felt players. Well, listen, it's a different regime now. Yeah. Okay, I understand that, but Liverpool have always been top class from our experience, haven't they? That's the contracts.
I will go talking to you about it. I always remember, like, when reading, the first you'd heard about yous signing contracts would be in the back of the Echo. It'd just be done. It'd never be like sort of contract standoff between Robbie Fowler and the club or Jamie Carragher and the club. It was always the news would come out. You'd signed a contract extension, new 4-year deal or whatever, and it was just done.
But it was a little bit like Trent, wasn't it? That come from nowhere. And it was really, you sort of loved to see that, and maybe that has something to do with being a local lad. Maybe, I'm not sure, but I don't know how you felt. I'd have hated nothing more than my situation to be plastered all over the press, and like I was arguing for more money and I was against the club. And I mean, my contract talks actually used to last about 2 or 3 hours. It was a bit like your agent go in, he'd come back, this is what's been on offer, are you happy with that, can we change that, can we get a little bit more there, well, what if I play somebody get, or whatever it may be, and he'd just make a phone call to Rick Parry, can we change that bit, can we move that bit, yeah, done. And a lot of that I think was the fact that I never want the supporters to think, who's he think he is, or he's trying to, you know, rifle the club.
I've got obviously a few things like that as well. So I remember, do you remember your first contract, your first professional that you signed when you were in the first team?
Yeah, I remember signing for about 700-800 quid when I played a few games for the first team in the pre-season, and Danny Murphy signed that summer.
So that'll be in 97.
But he'd come as a first team player, whereas I was someone coming through the ranks. Now he was on like probably 4 or 5 times, that which was normal, but the club were aware of that as well. So as soon as I played a couple of games for the first team, I sort of went to that figure, because, you know, it wasn't like that. You know, I was actually playing not ahead of Danny, but getting maybe more opportunities. So it was always, they were trying to level it up. I always felt the club.
Well, my first contract was obviously under Graham Souness, so obviously, when you're a young kid, 17, you sign a pro contract, but it's not the pro contract that everyone thinks it is. It's not like all of a sudden you become these massive wages. I think you're probably on about 200, 300 quid, which is obviously a lot of money back then, certainly for a young kid. But I remember playing for a few games, and then straight away I was in, obviously, Graham Souness' office, and he gives me this new contract. I won't say what it is, but it was such a big contract for, you know, I think 17, 18-year-old I was at the time. But
was it enough to get rid of that Escort?
Well, that's where I'm going. So I drove an A-Reg Escort. I mean, it was brilliant. In fact, it was horrendous. It was beige with brown interior.
I can remember. There's a bus stop over there. Where I remember. I think it was you played against Arsenal on a Saturday. Yeah. It was a 0-0 draw, and I remember being at that bus stop there as you pulled in on the Monday morning.
I think.
Going,
what the fuck's he doing in that?
That's probably. Well, with that, I used to lend my uncle's Maestro to go cruising with girls when I was younger. But, I mean, what it was, so I had this A-Reg Escort, so I must have drove in, and Graham Souness was probably thought, oh shit, we better sort him out. So he goes in after that, and he obviously gets me this contract. But what I remember most about, forget the money, I got a club car. And it was an hand-me-down from Bruce Grobbelaar. So it was, I remember it being a blue Golf from, I think it was Ian Skelly's, where obviously the club used to get a sponsor. But that was what I remember more than anything about the contract. Forget the money. I was getting a better car.
you know, as players, did you talk about contracts amongst yourself? Would you have known what other people were on, and did it ever cause any friction at all? Or?
No, maybe with your roommate, say if I was rooming with Michael or maybe Stevie, but you wouldn't sort of ask someone, what are you getting up or nothing like it. Just, I don't know, maybe it's different now. I don't know about Robbie, but no one ever spoke in the dressing room saying I'm getting this or I'm getting that. It was always a really private thing, and I always think that was right about things like that. So you, as I said, you might get a bit of a steer off a roommate, but I was with probably the 2 highest paid players in the club at the time, so I was never going to be...
But the club would tell you as well, though, would they, that this is like a secret thing that's in it, so don't be going out, because I think they were aware of that. If you were to go out the room and you were telling other people, they knew straight away that they'd be getting a knock, so whoever it was, Roy Evans or Gerard Hula, whoever the manager was at that time, they would tell you, well, don't be telling anyone.
Well, James, we've spoken about how nice it is to see Trent just come out of nowhere. He signed a contract. Fabinho's being next. Obviously, you've got Virgil van Dijk, Alisson, they want to get tied down, possibly Mo Salah as well. Do you think these will be longer protracted negotiations than what we've seen with the 2 players I've just mentioned?
Yeah, I think you can see the Salah one probably being more difficult to get over the line than, say, Alisson and Van Dijk, probably the other 2 big ones.
Why is that?
I think just because of where Mo Salah is in terms of his career. I think was he 29? This is obviously a big moment in his kind of career, isn't it? In terms of that, you're almost at that stage of your last really big contract. So I think that'll be interesting to see. But I think out of the front 3, obviously Mane and Firmino are in the same position in terms of just going into their last 2 years of the contract. But I think Salah will be the priority in terms of absolutely doing everything they possibly can to get him tied down. Because I think there's no way you can renew all the front 3. It's just completely unrealistic that you could commit. They're all under contract already, aren't they, to the age of 31. You can't commit the kind of funds that's going to be needed to keep all of them till the age of 33, 34.
Why?
Well, because
I just think about that, right? I mean, if you're going to be that decision, say you do 2 out of the 3. One of them's you're going to be faced with one of them being unhappy. Yeah. So then you're then in the territory where you're thinking, unhappy player, 4 goes down, 2 years left. Do you cash in? Yeah. And that's I think you either have to do them all.
No, I don't agree with that.
Don't you?
No, I just think I agree with James. I don't think Liverpool are in a position where the front 3 are going to almost. In 2 years' time, I'm going to change it front level. 3. I mean, one will go before the other one, and I agree with James. I think Mo Salah is the one right now to do first. 100%. I think Mane, and it's almost a case of Mane and Firmino win at the best last season. Yeah. They've been amazing for the club, but I think Liverpool have got to start thinking about how not go out the way to break the front 3. But I had this discussion last season on Sky Monday Night Football. You never see front 3s like this stay together this long. This has been together more than any famous front 3 you think of, maybe United, City, Chelsea. And I think sooner or later someone's going to break this up. It might be Jota next season. So I don't think it all should be, they all get contracts till that age. And I think attacking players, Robbie, you can tell me more, but is it fair to say attacking players would reach their peak actually earlier than most? I think attacking players' peak might actually be the mid-20s, but rather than 28 to 31.
Funny enough, I said this the other week. I do obviously a column in one of the Sunday papers, and I actually said it. So years ago when we were coming up, we were always told like players reach. Forget about positions or what clubs or whatever, but players we were always taught that reach the peak when they were 27. But the game now dictates that players obviously look after themselves better. The more sports science, everything about the club is geared towards benefits of players prolonging their career. So I'm thinking now that players' peaks is a lot later than 27. So regardless of whatever age or whatever position, I mean, you look at obviously Kane, you look at Salah now. I mean, they're past 27, and they're both extending their career. And they both scoring goals, far further than what they were a few years ago. So I think the peaks of players is just gone on over the years.
The other thing about that, isn't it? I mean, Salah's age now. I mean, he's probably got the body of a 23-year-old when you see him. He keeps himself absolutely immaculate, and he doesn't miss games, does he? He doesn't get any of those muscular injuries that keeps him out. So he is. he is absolute priority. He should be the one that the name of because they're not replacing. You cannot replace what he's given over the last 4 years.
Well, there's another player who's at that age bracket that we're just talking. How old are you when you get to your peak, or are you past your best? And Jordan Henderson, captain of the club, it caused a huge stir in the press maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago about Jordan's talks with the club not progressing exactly how he wanted. You covered that story, Dom, and you have got a close relationship with Jordan. Is it what insight can you give? How frustrated is he? Was he?
He is frustrated about it all. It's a really sort of strange situation. This is the way it's come out. I'm not telling you anything unusual here. He's unhappy. I'm surprised that they've let it get to this stage.
Who?
The club.
Why?
In terms of letting them get to 2 years, because I'm surprised that they've let so many get to 2 years. I think there's been natural points over the course of the last 2 years where contracts could have been reviewed and situations avoided. So like you just said before. So if you were doing well, they'd bring you in and they'd review the contract. Even if it was in 12 months, there's been opportunities to do that in the last 2 years after winning the league, after winning the Champions League. They could have done business then with them.
But I think it's slightly different than what I'm talking about is when you're a young player and you're completely sort of out of sync of where you've jumped quicker than people have thought you're going to jump, so you become a regular in the first team and you're on a squad player's wages. I think maybe if you're talking about Jordan and other players, I think once you become an established player, everybody knows you sign a 4-year deal, and probably halfway through we'll start talking, we'll start looking at it. I mean, I can understand Jordan's frustration because I've been there and we've all been there as players, but I can totally get where the club are coming from as well. Yeah. In that Jordan's been out for a long time. He's 31 and he's got 2 years to go, which is a long time. And I go back to my own situation on that. Is I used to always, me and Steve used to sort of, how it worked, we'd sort of sign a 4-year deal together one summer, and 2 years later we'd sign again. Now, I remember one time Stevie and Torres signed under Rafa about 2009. It just come out, boom, Stevie and Torres have signed a new contract. Like, no one told me about that, or no, yeah. But I was 31. Right. I think Stevie would have been 29. And don't get me wrong, at the time I was a bit frustrated, maybe the way Jordan's feeling now, but when you sort of look at the bigger picture, I could understand it. Now, what I would have liked at that time was maybe the club to say to me, I know you normally sign with Stevie, or you sign with 2 years to go, but it's different now, you're 31, we'll have a look at it in 6 months, in 12 months. And I thought, okay, fair enough, what am I going to do? I'm not going to leave. And I just think you've got to understand, and I'd hope someone at the club have maybe said that to Jordan, things have slightly changed rather than when you're 26, 27. When you've got 2 years to go at 31, when he's been out for 5 years, I don't think we can have him on the club. Even though Jordan might be frustrated and he wants to sort his future out, 2 years is a long time, and once you get to a certain age, things change from the club's point of view, and it is a business, we all know.
No, I totally understand that point of view about the age and the situation and the way of the world. They can't just, as you said, start throwing money out left, right and centre. I get that, but there's ways and means about going about business, isn't it, in terms of keeping people, making them feel important, making them feel valued. I mean, did you ever get, either of you feel that you were taken for granted because you were the local lads or things like that? Because I think that there might be an element of maybe that he's feeling taken for granted.
I never, to be honest, but I know, I mean, I've obviously spoke to other players who feel as though they have. Yeah, I was never, well, I didn't think, I felt as though, I mean, I never really had a team that was built around me, whereas I felt other players have. Did it bother me? No, it didn't, because I was happy at the club. I was happy, obviously, getting paid. I was happy with my contract, so it didn't faze me or it didn't bother me. And as a player, I was never worried about that anyway, because I was just happy, with the contracts I had, and obviously, B, I was playing. So, but I mean, I take your point on board, Karen. I think it's probably spot on, and probably people don't really understand that. Whereas Jordan Henderson, as much as he is being brilliant for Liverpool, he came as a player, he was very raw, but then you've seen the progression from a young kid, if you like, to the player he is now, and he is a leader. But you get to a certain point where you have a lot of injuries, and maybe the club are feeling as though we can't really just take that chance until we see him have maybe an extended run in the side, and then we can maybe talk about having an extended contract. And also what you've got to remember as well is the club have probably lost a lot of money. So as much as James was saying earlier on about retention now is massively important for players, and you don't want to be signing players, I think it's massively important that you don't just give money out to players just for the sake of it. But the players have got to come back, and I'm not saying he hasn't proved his worth by any means, but he's got to have, I think, an extended stay in the side or in the squad, if you like, just to prove to people that this is the right choice. And look, we all think he will probably stay, but not just going to give him the contract just for the sake of it, are he's got to prove it.
But I think what you said there is interesting when you talk about being taken for granted as a local player. And in some ways, I think Jordan is probably, he's been here that long, he's almost seen as, not a local player, but he's a Liverpool guy, he's seen as that. And Jordan, I always think, is similar to myself and a little bit different to Robbie, Stevie and maybe Michael Owen, who are local players, whereas yous were the stars of the team. Jordan's been amazing, but he's never been Van Dijk or Salah or seen as the star of the team. I was never seen as the star of the team. Maybe it's the position you play, the quality of the player, whatever that may be. And at times you do feel a little bit, oh, why is he getting that or why is he getting that? And sometimes I can understand Jordan might be looking at it and saying, well, why are they all over Van Dijk? Why are they all over Salah to sign? I've been the captain, I've done that. And I think sometimes that does come into it. And my own experience of that was in 2007 when I was playing possibly my best football I'd ever played for the club. We're in the Champions League final, and there's actually 4 or 5 of us about to sign a contract before the final. So it was me, Stevie, Xabi Alonso and Pepe Reina. And Rafa Benitez said to me in typical Rafa style, your contract will be sorted last. And I said, why is that? He said, because I know you won't leave. And then you think, well, isn't that getting taken for granted a little bit? You're a bit like, well, he's obviously telling me I'm the most loyal. Yeah. So he shouldn't mind me from first. But I can, now when I stand back and I go, well, if I was a manager, you'd have almost got to think, well, we can't have the ones we're leaving. We've got to make sure there's, I know Carragher won't leave, so I can understand it. But again, it is one of those bits where maybe Jordan's feeling right now, the club are all over it with me, the players, what about me? Look what I've done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know whether it comes down to signing, giving them the contract tomorrow and signing and everything's all right. I think there needs to be some kind of communication with them in terms of, assuring things, making them feel valuable or whatever.
Hey, Dom, are you saying that there's never been anyone from the club who's actually approached Jordan? So, well,
there was conversation before the Euros, and it was basically, where do we stand, and it was like, well, nothing's happening at the minute.
But I mean, I again, just what I was saying before about Jordan, and look, I'm not knocking him because I think he has been absolutely brilliant for Liverpool, and what he's achieved as a captain has been, I mean, it's been extraordinary, really, hasn't it? But he has got to prove that he can have an extended run on the side, because the club can, just for the sake of the club, for the sake of everyone. You can't just give contracts out just for players just because they've been here and just because you're captain. You've got to go out and you've got to prove your worth, and you've got to show everyone that you are that player that we all know you are. But you've got to prove it to people.
Is that fair, James? That these players at the club now, these are legends. These are going to be remembered forever, and we'll always have a huge gratitude for bringing the title back, another Champions League. But is that sort of the awkward situation the club are in now, where it almost feels like we can't be seen to be rewarding players for what they've done? Maybe in the past they've still got to prove themselves. You feel a bit harsh saying that way, because especially when you talk about Jordan Henderson, but you understand, I mean, the club have almost got to think, well, how good will he be into the 30s?
Yeah, but I think it's about essentially taking the emotion out of the decision-making process, which is obviously why Jurgen Klopp isn't absolutely integral to dishing out new contracts, because I think if it was Klopp's decision, then Wijnaldum would clearly still be a Liverpool player, and if it was Klopp's decision, I think Jordan Henderson would have already signed, or just about to sign probably a couple of years extension as well. But it goes above Klopp's head. It's Michael Edwards, it's Mike Gordon, and they make business decisions as you said. And I think part of the issue at the moment as well, with so many players entering their last 2 years, as Dom said previously, is the impact of the pandemic as well, because no one got a new contract during the last 18 months before This summer has been the time when they've essentially started addressing these issues, and certainly from the people I've spoken to around the Jordan situation, it's that they've been stressing it's not about money, it's about importance, it's about feeling valued in terms of where the Liverpool see him in 2 years' time. And clearly Jordan Henderson in 2-3 years' time still sees himself as absolutely integral to Liverpool's hopes of winning trophies, at the heart of that midfield, where I think what's on the table at the moment almost feels like managed decline. I don't know whether that's quite the right phrase, but do you know what I mean in terms of
it's probably not actually.
But you know you trying to get liquid market James.
No, that's right. No, but do you know what I mean in terms of just almost that a sense of we want to keep you around, but your role is going to be reducing, and and that's when. Let's not forget what Steven Gerrard was 34 when I think his agent had a 15-minute meeting with Ian Ayre, and if that's the way that it comes down to for Steven Gerrard, it is at the end of the day it is a very ruthless business, isn't it?
James, has Jordan fell into that category of when the American group took over and he fell into this remit where you get to a certain age and we can't obviously extend contracts, or we're not going to sign players going to come to a certain age. Has Jordan sort of fell into that remit, or is that remit from the from the owners just fell out the window?
No. I think he definitely falls into that remit because they, as was the message all the way through the Wijnaldum saga, there's a real reluctance to dish out, relatively long, lucrative extensions to players who have gone past 30. I think I can understand it, but I also think it's a very dangerous way of, as we said before, someone like Mo Salah. You can't tell me that, he's 30 next birthday. You're seriously saying we think he's on the way down. He's not. Look at his numbers; they keep going up and up. So I think they have to be careful. I think I completely understand the thing about not having too many players getting too old together and being lumbered with massive wages for players who aren't still doing it week in, week out. But I think there's a real danger that Liverpool end up going the other way, and you hemorrhage all this amazing experience.
That's what I mean. I want to stress that as well. It isn't about money. I want to make that clear about him. It isn't about he's not going in and saying I want this or I'm off. It isn't about that. In a perfect world, he would sign for another 4 years, see his career out, and then there would be a pathway into maybe being part of the backroom staff. He loves it here. He absolutely. Why would he want to uproot his kids? He lives half an hour away from here. He's given his the best part of his life to it. He doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to go. But I'm just saying, you should know better in terms of the sort of feeling that can be created in a player's mind or in a dressing room if something sort of goes wrong, and it's very hard to get the thought out of your mind until it's addressed, and I think that's what they need to do.
I mean, look,
understand what I mean?
Yeah, no, listen, I can totally get where Jordan's come from, but I think when you get sort of past 30, psychologically it does change. Whether, as you said, Robbie, your peak years are later on, but I just think 2 years is still a long time. I'm not going to wait till the end of that, but I think I could understand if this started coming out at maybe Christmas time or February, March. I think then it does need sorting out. I just think right now it's not the be all and end all at the moment. I understand from Jordan's point of view he'll think that, but I can see where the club are coming from. But going off Jordan's Instagram, he looks in prime condition. He's putting a picture on every day. He's doing a lot of back work.
He loves his back,
So whether he's trying to entice Michael Edwards or other suitors outside with his social media, that's the way of the world. But we're talking about a guy who is still at the club. Jordan Henderson's got 2 years to go, but another midfield player left, got a great send-off in his last game, Wijnaldum, at Anfield, and I put something on Twitter that caused a little bit of a stir with Liverpool.
Not like you.
Support. No, not like me, to get things going, if you like. But, I mean, Wijnaldum, for a while, we knew this was coming with his contract. I think he was a player who did want to stay. Yeah, I think, Klopp wanted him to stay, we know that. We go back to giving Gini a 4-year deal at 30 years of age, how much that would maybe be, £30-40 million. He then spoke about maybe being disappointed with the reaction on social media maybe at times to his performance. That was something I commented on. I mean, James, I think you obviously came out in I think a piece on Gini Wijnaldum and defended his situation because he got a little bit of stick for some of those commentary made. I mean, where are you on the whole Wijnaldum situation from his point of view and how he dealt with it?
Yeah, I understand his frustration because I think from the interview he gave, I think some people, especially on social media, jumped to the conclusion, well, hang on a minute, is he seriously suggesting he ended up leaving Liverpool because of the stick he was getting on social media? And I don't think that's fair. I think when you read his quotes back, he talks about, you know, he had a great relationship with the manager, he wanted him to stay, the teammates wanted him to stay. He talked about the problem was on the other side. And, you know, just to be clear, the other side, he meant FSG, he meant the owners, who he didn't feel loved and appreciated by. And then it was obviously then because he went on to talk about the social media stick, then I think some people put 2 and 2 together and got 5.
But I mean, I got involved in that, and maybe it was seen that I was actually giving him a little bit of stick, and it wasn't that really. But when you say that it was people from the other side, it basically, let's make it very simple, it boiled down to the fact that Wijnaldum thought he was worth X amount, and the owners thought he was. Now, I don't think anyone should fall out over that.
No.
You know, they don't think he's worth that. That's their prerogative, and he thinks he's worth more than that. And that was my thing when I put the tweet out, when I said, you know, that's football. That wasn't having a go at Wijnaldum. What I'm saying is, I'm not having a go at Wijnaldum for trying to maximise the potential earning-wise. He'd been amazing for the club. He was probably underpaid because he didn't sign a new contract in his time at the club. He wanted to have get a few quid on his last contract. He can earn that going on a Bosman. But the owners think you're worth that. The player wants that. You can't agree. That's football. There's no falling out here. It's just, that's what it is. But you know.
Just mention something about the contract that he was on as well. You think about where he's come from Newcastle. So when he's come from Newcastle, he wouldn't have been on a great deal there. He's come to Liverpool maybe double what he was on at Newcastle. It's not a lot for what Liverpool were paying at the time. So when he's come in 2016, it's great because he's doubled his money. But then he's gone 5 years, he's helped them win everything and not had anything in that time. So you can sort of understand where
I agree, and that's why I think on the social media or fans in general, some people, when a player leaves on a Bosman, it's like, oh, he's greedy, he's going for the money. Now, if I'm being totally honest, I think Wijnaldum has looked at it and thought, well, you know, I haven't been as paid as highly as some of the players. I've got a chance to go on a free contract to whether it was Barcelona first, then PSG, we know we've got a few quid, and he can earn amazing money, and you know what, good luck to him, and he deserves it for what he did for Liverpool. So I'd never call him greedy. I'm not criticising him for that at all. I was just a bit, when he mentioned the social media situation of it. Now, I mean, my only problem with that is not that it's okay for people to abuse people or criticise them. You know, we all get it at different times, and you probably get it as well. I was just a little bit like, I felt he was 30 years of age playing for Liverpool. I wouldn't want to worry about social media. I'd be thinking, just, you know, switch it off, let someone else use it for you. I can understand, like, the younger lads. I think Curtis Jones has been upset before. I think he put a tweet out last season saying, oh, the real fans, or
Nico Williams as well. Yeah.
I can understand, because young kids they're on the phone. What are people saying? I think I was like that myself, whether it was reading the Liverpool Echo or listening to a phone in. But when you get to sort of later on in your career, I think you've got to be. That's just, you've got to almost treat that as noise. Now, am I right? Am I wrong?
No, I think you're spot on. I think with clubs now, they have access to all the psychologists and everyone. So the psychologists should be saying to these players, well, it's not real as a social media, because everyone hides behind, you know, an egg or whatever, you know, a different picture. So, you know, people who are giving stick out, you know, it's not real, is it? They just can get this platform where they can put anything, or they feel as though they can put anything they want out. And players, if you are going to take it to heart, then you shouldn't really be on social media.
Would you be on social media if you were playing in your heyday now? How would you use social media?
You know what? I probably would be, but I would be sensible with it. I'd use it when I needed to use it.
I like him then.
Yeah. No, but I mean,
I like throwing hand grenades.
No, but I mean, God, I remember Carragher years ago, and the way he is now, you wouldn't ever think he would be like that, because he always kept himself to himself in terms of football and not really being out there, you know, doing interviews. You weren't really interested in doing interviews because you didn't want to. You were just happy doing what you needed to do, and I think that's a good that's a good effort, isn't it? Because that's what you're focused on, what you need to do, and your mental aspect is brilliant because you're focused on what you need to do, so you can forget about, you know, the outside world. But some players can't now, but they should be able to when they have. You know, we didn't have access to psychologists. You know, we didn't have access to everything that the players have got now.
I was going to say, how did you cope, like, the first time you seen a bad letter about yourself?
No, you don't like it, and I'm not saying Wijnaldum shouldn't maybe get upset with the odd comment. Even now, sometimes I'll pick my phone and I'll be honest with you, I don't see any reaction to things that I say. If I'm being totally honest, notifications and things, I switch it off because what you gain, you don't really gain from it. Now, when you're a kid, you'd have a big win, or you might read the Echo, or what's the letters page say, and if you got a bad one or something, you'd be like, oh, for God's sake. But it's completely different now with social media, where everyone can get at you. And the only way I can give an example is, it's like playing for Liverpool and then going in the 12th man and standing at the bar and listening to what everyone else is saying about you. You know, that's what people have got. Every fan now can say, he was good, he was shite, he was that. And I worry about players now, certainly young players coming in. It will affect you, so you've got to find a way. I was just thinking, but that affect Wijnaldum? People criticise him as a player when he's been amazing. He hasn't even played bad. Imagine he played bad.
I think one factor as well, from having done a few interviews with players in the last 12, 18 months, is the pandemic, where I think because playing in empty stadiums has led to players looking at social media more, where before, I think Nico Williams is probably the perfect example of that, where he would have felt the love of walking out at Anfield in front of 54,000, and then when he came off again, he probably wouldn't have felt the need to go and look on social media. But because he'd come out, he played on an empty stadium, come out, looked, and it was like, you're looking for affirmation, you're looking for how do people think I do, and then we all know that social media is like the worst possible barometer of how you actually did, and I think that has definitely affected people.
I just think social media, whether you're a player, you're a journalist, pundits like we're doing now, I think it's a powerful tool. It really is, and you can use it to your own advantage. And I think it's not, you've almost got to be in a position where it's not using you, you're using it. And I feel I'm in that place now. Maybe I wasn't at the start because you're reading all different comments and maybe reacting to people and going back at people on different things. But it's a chance for you to have your say, promote what you're doing. And as I said, Wijnaldum is quite active on social media. You can see, look at how he's still posting plenty of stuff up, going to PSG. And rightly so, he should. He's proud, he's playing for a huge club, a massive club. But I just hope players in the future, not just Wijnaldum, younger players especially, use it for their own benefit and not being obsessed with what some stranger says or what someone reacts to your performance. You know what you've done, your manager knows what you've done. Wijnaldum plays every week, so he knows what Klopp thinks of him, and he's been massively successful, an absolute legendary figure for Liverpool. And I just, when he just said that, I just thought, even if it's true, isn't that? Just leave it.
I think what you're saying there, obviously, with talking about Wijnaldum and Nico Williams and all these players who are focused and worried about what's said on social media. I remember years ago, and you say, how do players from yesterday react to it? Obviously, it wasn't about when we were there, but you come into a dressing room at Melwood on a Monday morning and picked up the paper, picked up one of the dailies or picked up the Echo, and you seen you got a 4 or a 5 out of 10. I mean, I used to defend players. Yeah. And that's just like one little
What's
thing.
fucking Tom King know about football?
I remember obviously Jason McAteer was the worst in the world. I mean, if he got a 5, he was devastated. And that ruined his day. I mean, that's just one little platform.
The funny thing is, being in the odd press box when Liverpool playing Champions League games, be honest lads here, certainly for a night game, you don't watch that much of the game, do you? You're right, your match report in the second half. You're watching? Absolutely. I'm just giving him a 5, he won't be there.
You always hear that, don't you? Someone will shout up, how's such and such done tonight? What do you reckon, 6 or 7? 6.
But that was the barometer years ago, wasn't it? So it was not like social media, or he's going to get stick or I'm going to get that. You picked up the paper and find out what marks you got out of 10. I was 7. I was a standard 7, mate.
I always remember, we played a game at Portsmouth, and I'd done all right in the game. I think we'd won, and I'd done okay. It was definitely a 7. Right. I should have been getting a 7. And a journalist on the way asked me for an interview, and I just didn't fancy it. I was, I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. I just jumped on the coach. And then he read the match report and gave me a 5. I went, should have done that interview.
You'd have gone to an 8 there, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Okay, well, we've touched on the contract. I just want to ask you, Robbie, on something regarding Wijnaldum, because he's actually gone on a free transfer, and it's obviously a lot more common now in football, but one of our good mates and a big mate of yours was one of the first players to go on a Bosman, that was Steve McMahon.
Yep.
Now, Stevie never won the league or the Champions League like Wijnaldum, but you and him, it's fair to say, carried that Roy Evans team and were like two of the best players in the Premier League for 5 or 6 years, and then he moved on and he didn't get the sort of send-off Wijnaldum got in that last game at Anfield. Do you think that was because of the time and people didn't understand the Bosman rule? Do you think it was because he was a local lad?
Probably that. You know, that was, I think, when I spoke before about, you know, sometimes players feel undervalued, I think Macca did, in all fairness. I mean, when I think of the best players I've ever played with, I mean, I'll always obviously mention Stevie G, but...
You're going to say me then?
Yeah. Well, I've pointed at you.
That's because
But Macca always gets certainly a mention from me because he was phenomenal for Liverpool. And I mean, in his defence, he did tell the club what was happening. He knew what was happening, so maybe he did feel undervalued, and he felt as though he needed to get away and progress his football, because obviously he's seen, I'm not saying Liverpool were maybe looking stagnant, but he just felt he could grow somewhere else. And he's gone, and you know, fair play to him for doing it. You know, he said all the right things. You know, he loves Liverpool. You know, still speaks highly of Liverpool. Still speaks highly of the fans. But what you've got to say is, I think he, as much as he was brilliant here, I think he improved when he went away as well. I think he still is probably the most decorated Brit who's ever played abroad, and I mean, he was phenomenal over at Madrid. You know, going into that, you know, Galactico side and not looking out of place, I mean, speaks volumes for, you know, Macca as a player. He's a clever lad who we read reports about players going into certain situations or certain clubs abroad where they don't really take to, you know, the local culture. But Macca, you know, was straight in. He knew that for him to develop as a player and a person, that he was straight in, learning lessons, obviously Spanish lessons, and getting the gist of what it was in the dressing room, and he took to it so quick, and everyone loved him over there.
Dom, you were probably, I would imagine, a supporter then when Steve Mac left and Henderson now and Wijnaldum left. What's your opinion on the contrast of feeling when both players left?
Just before you carry on there, but I think what you said before, Car, as well, it was new then, one at the Bosman, so we didn't, you know, we didn't really understand the gist of what was happening. We didn't really understand the rulings of what can be.
Because I always think about being a local lad, and I always think you've almost got to, or you're treated differently, or thought differently as a supporter when you're a local player. What I mean by that is you're the supporter on the pitch in some ways, and a supporter would think, well, I'll never leave the club. Whereas we almost expect it from players who come into the club, a foreign player. Whereas I always had the feeling it was a bit, you think you are? Yeah. You know, you're only one of us. You're not. You know, I didn't know if there was something that, as Robbie said, it was that no one really understood it.
Well, it's funny. I loved him. I loved him as a player. I just thought he was absolutely brilliant. And I remember when they were going to sell him to Barcelona, and the story being on the back of the Echo, and it was like, they're going to sell McManaman. What? And they played Leeds the following night, and he scored 1-2-0. Carragher Zeta scored 2. Remember this game vividly. And the whole end was singing his name about not letting him go. But it was clear then that the indications were that there was an asset that was going to go, and he thought at one point, didn't he, that he was going to go to Juventus.
Yeah, he
had
did.
Barcelona. There was he started learning Italian. He told me this a couple of years ago because he thought he was going to go to Juventus.
You must be a better mate than me then, because
and then Madrid came in at the last minute, and that's where he.
Well, this is what we think with football as well. So loyalty is a two-way street. It is. So what you're saying there, Car, about the fan, you're being on a pitch, and everyone thinks, well, who do you think you are? You're only one of us. But you as a player feel as though you've got to get loyalty from somewhere else, from the club as well. So this is what I was saying, even with myself, I know that the club tried to sell me. You know, they accepted an offer from Aston Villa when they were good. From Chelsea. So I knew that the club were obviously trying to get me. So it's a two-way street. So it can't always be on the player.
Did you know the Aston Villa one?
Yeah, do me over.
But it can't always be on the player, so you know, obviously not everyone falls into that boat in that category, but you know, even with Macca, you've just said yourself there, so Macca had told the club that obviously he was going, but you know, before, and they tried to sell him to Barcelona as well. So, you know, all of a sudden you think maybe
you're right though about the reaction of the final game. It was no like there was no grand send off for him. It was Wimbledon, wasn't it? 3-0 winning.
Yeah, I remember playing in the game. He'd come off the 15 minutes to get an ovation. And listen, I'm not saying Wijnaldum shouldn't have got that. I've always said this from the day McManaman left, that I've always felt that he should have had a bit more recognition, or he should be almost loved a bit more. He was one of the best players the club have had, or certainly in the 90s or the Premier League year. He was fantastic. And
it was a spell, wasn't it? It was just it felt like if you're in trouble, just knock the ball to him and he'll run 60 yards with it. Yeah. Get you out of trouble and do something unbelievable at the end of it.
Yeah, I think the way free transfers are looked upon has completely changed, hasn't it now? Because I think he was a victim of the fact that it was so new, and I think a lot of people just thought at the time, well, this is wrong. You know, we shouldn't be losing someone who's so good, so influential for nothing. Well, I think now we're in a situation where it's just become part and parcel of the modern game. That, you know, Liverpool had it a few years ago, didn't they, with Emre Can. You know, the club knew that they had that to run down. The same thing with Wijnaldum. So I think that's why, you know, we saw the outpouring of love for Wijnaldum at the back end of the season. You know, because, you know, one reason was because I think it is now become more accepted that the players do that. But, you know, and secondly, I think the other thing that Wijnaldum pointed out in that interview was, you know, you couldn't ever accuse him of downing tools, could you? When his contract was running down, you know, he could have, without his future sorted out, it could have been easy for him to have been worried about picking up a knock and the longer term impact of that. But, you know, he gave absolutely everything to the final day and deserved the farewell that he got.
Okay, boys, final thoughts on the podcast? Anything you want to throw in? Predictions, anything?
Right, go on, Dom.
I want a little more clarification on this Aston Villa stuff.
Well, what was I going to say?
When was it?
Just before I went.
So
well, I went to Leeds, obviously, down at the end. But Aston Villa came in, Chelsea came in.
I remember Chelsea.
Yeah, no, it was Aston Villa definitely before. But I knew that I probably wasn't wanted then. So when Leeds came in, I might as well. I'm not wanted here. I don't feel loved.
Ridgedale's throwing the money involved.
Were you talking predictions?
Anything? What do you want to finish the podcast with?
Yeah, we have pretty predictions then. So obviously we've been talking about Liverpool now. We see the likes of Harry Kane and various other players getting linked with City. Give us your prediction for this year's Prem. Can Liverpool win it?
If Kane stays at Tottenham, yes.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, I will make a prediction. I think Liverpool will win one of the big two trophies this year. I think they will.
They're all big trophies, on what ones?
The biggest two, one of the Premier League or the Champions League, they'll win one of them too.
What about you, Cara? What's your prediction?
I think it's difficult to stop City this season, you know, if they get Kane. But as we were speaking before the podcast, I don't think Kane dramatically changes anything, because City are always the top goal scorers. Even the year Liverpool won the league, City still scored the most goals. If City aren't going to win the league, it'll be down to them having problems defensively, I would imagine, if Liverpool are to win that. I think Chelsea will be right up there this season. I think Man United's business has been really good, so I don't think it'll be a case of Liverpool and City as it felt like.
That's interesting what you're saying there, Cara, about obviously Manchester United. So for years now, we've always heard Manchester United are maybe 2 players away from being a side that will challenge a Liverpool or a Man City. They've signed 2 players. Are they that team now?
I don't think United can win the league as long as they've got a goalkeeper good enough. I don't think they have. I think obviously Liverpool and Man City have got those, you know, top class goalkeepers. I don't think United are there. I think De Gea's past his best. I don't think Dean Henderson's good enough, really. So I don't think United can win the league. But I do think they are 2 really good signings that you look on paper and you think, yeah, you know, the pedigree of Varane, Sancho, young player who was ripping it up in the Bundesliga or a top club. United need a player there, so I think they'll be a lot more competitive, really. But I still think, you know, still think City are the team to beat, and it looks like they're going to go again in the transfer market, where I'm not quite sure Liverpool will.
Yeah, talking of 2, I mean, Liverpool are 2 players short for me. If they're going to go toe to toe with City this season, I think still haven't replaced Wijnaldum, which I think is a Wijnaldum. I just don't think there's, when you look at, apart from his ability, just his durability in terms of just how many games he played, and I think yes, Keita has looked good in pre-season, but you know, a
How many
week.
times
but-
have we
yeah,
heard
but-
that?
Exactly. Just this season is make or break for Naby Keita again. So it's that, and I still think at the top end of the pitch, I still think with the when you look at the downturn of someone like Firmino last season, yes, there's Jota, but for me this summer was the perfect.
Liverpool? Here's one for you then. It's for you, Car, as well. Do Liverpool need a number 9?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, what I've been thinking, a lot of talkers, what James said, they need a midfield player and an attacking player. If I had the choice of one or the other, I'd say an attacking player. I still think there's a lot of bodies in midfield. I agree with James, I'd like to see one come in, but I still think there's probably 6 players really who play in those 3 midfield positions. I think the top end of the pitch, though, I don't actually think there's a striker at the club. Because if you think of Origi when he plays for Liverpool now, when he comes on, so he always goes on the left wing. He very rarely plays through the middle, so Liverpool haven't actually got a centre forward who you just think that's his role now. Firmino right now, I'd love Liverpool now to almost buy Firmino's replacement this summer. Not necessarily exactly the same type of player, there's not many like him, but a little bit like when Man City bought Jesus and they had Aguero. Now, you knew Jesus at that time, and maybe not even right now, is good enough to be Man City's main man, 50 games a season, going to get you over 30 goals. But he's good, and you think he'll get a goal at any time, he could do something clever, and I just don't think they've got someone to come off the bench and get us a goal, and that's my worry this season for Liverpool. Will they score enough goals? I always think there's so much pressure on Salah and Mane. Jota can add to that to score, because the midfield don't score. Even the full-backs, even though they create a lot, they don't. Reece used to get you 5 or 6. I think Van Dijk this season will get you 5 or 6. But I just think I'd like to see Liverpool have another person who could score goals, and I just think someone better than Origi, Minamino, or Shaqiri, and just someone really you think, oh, he's really pushing for a first team slot here. Now, I think Jota's going to really do that. I'd just like to see one more in a central position.
What type, and we just obviously mentioned number 9, what type of player as such as that number 9, or what type
you know what who's just come to the top of my head here, and I don't think the club would buy him for obvious reasons, but like Danny Ings, they had Danny Ings. Now I can understand why he moved on, but you look at him at Southampton, you think he's probably not good enough to play every week for a top 14, but every time you watch him play, you think he can get you a goal in. You always think he's going to score a goal. Now I'm not saying, but almost that type where he's not 60, 70 million, because Liverpool haven't got that, but some of it, 25, 30 million, who you think he's going to be happy to be on the bench, but he can come on and do the job. It's an awkward position, that, I think, to get someone who's of the right quality, but who could accept being on the bench.
Well, that's what. So when you think of a number 9, so you obviously look at
through the centre, doesn't he?
Of course. So you're looking at the likes of Lewandowski, Kane. You're looking at Erland. You're looking at Lukaku. Can Liverpool afford any of them players?
No.
No.
And that's why I think when the time comes in the next 12, 18 months where you start that process of evolving the front 3 and refreshing it, they'll be looking for like the type of player they signed when they brought in Mo Salah, not the superstar, but the player who people still had their doubts about, Sadio Mane, the Southampton attacker. People, I think that is the process that will start again, is targeting those kind of players, the ones who they think they can elevate to world-class level, rather than buying the finished article.
Okay, so there are predictions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next stuff.
We'll see you in May, see if we got any of them right. Well, listen, thanks for joining us on the first episode of This Is Melwood podcast. We'll be doing these monthly. What do you fancy, lads?
Yeah, monthly, yeah.
Sounds good.
Are you picking yourself for next month as well?
So,
That's going to be happy.
Why don't you go and get Macher, eh?
All right. See you all in September.